Hello, everyone. Going to get started on our webinar for today. Okay, before we get started, just want to go through some housekeeping notes. So it looks like we have a lot of people registered today. I think we had actually over 750 people who became registered for it. I'm not quite sure exactly the number online. We'll probably get that number shortly. My name is Susan Jacobson. I'm one of the team members on the Post-Secondary Student Standard Project at the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and I'm very happy to be hosting this webinar today. So just before we get started, I'll go through a few housekeeping items just to help the webinar along. So first of all, audio is provided in the broadcast mode through your computer speakers. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. The webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the Mental Health Commission website in the webinar archive sections following the presentations within a few weeks. So sometime in October you'll be able to get it. If you would like a copy of today's slide deck, you can download it right now using the Files pod, and that's located in the center right of your screen. So select the item you wish to download and click Download File. So I invite you to send any questions using the Q&A pod, which can be found on the bottom right of your screen. Questions posted in this pod will go directly to us as the host. And lastly, we will hold most questions to the end, and we will try to address as many as we can. Okay. We have a very distinguished panel today. One of our guests is Verity Turpin, who is currently the Assistant Vice Provost, Student Affairs, responsible for student health and wellness, residence and student life at Dalhousie University. She's the chair of the Alcohol Advisory Committee and oversees the alcohol harm reduction strategy for the institution, as well as the Student Code of Conduct. Over the last 4 years, Verity has led a team to develop Dalhousie's first student wellness strategy, as well as transform how Dalhousie delivers primary and mental health support to students using an interprofessional collaborative healthcare model. So welcome, Verity. Our other guest is Shifra Gadamseti, who is a registered nurse and is currently completing an additional Bachelor's of Art degree in sociology at Mount Royal University. She is the Executive Director of the Council of Alberta University Students and a member of the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. And she sits on the Executive Advisory Committee for the Post-Secondary Student Standards. She has incredible experience and expertise on this subject. So to get started, I just want to do a little bit of an overview of what we're looking at with the standard before we go on to talking about entering the workplace. So we know that acquiring a post-secondary education is an exciting, transformative, and demanding time. And we know that students are diverse, and each one will have a different experience and a different challenge. Each student brings a unique set of interests, skills, life experiences to their university and college experience. Juggling academic, financial, family, and personal demands are some of the newer experiences that our students commonly share. Some students transitioning directly from secondary students may be away from home, family, and friends for the very first time. Others may face challenges in reintegrating into student life after having been out of the workforce for many years. Whatever the challenges and experiences, they do provide an opportunity for students to grow and learn using new coping skills and to be developing resilience. 2 million. This is an important time for people where there's 2 million students right now in higher education, from universities to colleges, institutes, cégeps, polytechnics, so all institutions. And although 16 to 24 is the age range of the majority of post-secondary students, they can be from any one of these age groups, from adult students onwards and different age groups. They also can be from groups such as the people from Indigenous groups, Francophone, LGBTQ Two-Spirit Plus, immigrant or refugee populations, international students, the distant online learners. They can be students with disabilities. They might live on campus or off campus. They might be residents or commuters. They might live at home or live independently. Post-secondary institutions are facing increased demands and pressures to support the mental health and well-being of all of their students in order to support students' academic success and life success. This is why it's important for us to pay attention to student mental health and what impact is it going to have on the workforce of the future. So there is a need for a national framework. You might recall that in 2013, the Mental Health Commission launched a standard called Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace. And we refer to this most commonly as the workplace standard. The workplace standard is being used by post-secondary institutions like Carleton University, Waterloo University, Sheridan College, and many others to promote and protect the mental health of their staff and of their faculty. Now, we are embarking on the same journey to promote and protect the mental health of students. And really, it's about a plan, do, check, and act type of framework, and it creates a process for organizations. Post-secondary institutions will benefit from a nationally established systematic framework to protect and promote the psychological health and safety of students. Such a framework would be evidence and practice informed to address student mental health at various stages of their tenure and state of mental health and well-being. The framework would also enhance the collaborative approach to promoting mental health for students by clearly identifying the shared responsibilities of students, staff, and faculty. Once this framework or standard is actually developed, there will be an implementation guide to accompany it. The Mental Health Commission of Canada is championing the development of this voluntary standard. We are doing this with the generous support of funders such as Bell Let's Talk, the Rossi Family Foundation, Brain Canada, and Royal Bank of Canada, and with organizations such as Colleges and Institutes Canada and Universities Canada. The Mental Health Commission will work collaboratively with the Canadian Standards Association, or CSA Group, which is the standards development organization, towards the development of this standard. They are in the process of putting together a technical committee of 36 experts on the subject, and the Mental Health Commission has developed a 20-member executive advisory committee to work with the technical committee on this project. So it's important to recognize here that there has been so much great work done and progress made by post-secondary institutions, and we will be building on that existing work. Work such as the Okanagan Charter, which is an international charter for health promoting universities and colleges, the University of Calgary Campus Mental Health Strategy, York University Student Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy, the Post-Secondary Student Mental Health Guide to a Systemic Approach through CACUS. So we'll be building on that work that has already been done. And I apologize if there's many other wonderful programs we haven't been able to mention, but they will be included during this process. The overall goal of this standard is to support student success. It's to protect and promote student mental health, and by doing that, support student success. And how students themselves define success can be quite different. However, we all would probably agree that finding paid work in their field of study will be an important element. Just quickly, the project objectives. To establish a standard for the post-secondary institutions, to support student success is through the development and implementation of a practical and flexible framework that enables institutions to protect and promote students' psychological health and safety. So after developing an executive advisory committee and a technical committee, we contracted at the Mental Health Commission Dr. Heather Stewart, who is a PhD professor and Bell Canada Mental Health and Anti-Stigma Research Chair at Queen's University. And with her team, she carried out a scoping review of the current literature to assist us with the following goal. And that was to share information on emerging and promising practices related to psychological health and safety, services and programs for post-secondary students, and how those practices, how the uptake is encouraged. The report investigated themes common to the discussion about post-secondary student mental health, both nationally and internationally. A detailed scoping review of the literature was undertaken, exploring both peer-reviewed academic sources and gray literature. And an executive summary of this will be available on our website shortly. So a lot of discussion was around stress on campus, and it really is one of the first things that we really need to look at, which is no surprise to anyone. So there was a 2016 National College Health Assessment Survey conducted among 43,000 post-secondary students at 43 institutions across Canada. And no surprise to anyone, indicated a high prevalence of stress among students. So the sources of stress that were identified in the literature included, obviously, academics, so time management, assignments, exams. It also identified the campus culture, so environmental issues such as racism, sexism, sexual harassment, and perceived safety, in addition to socio-cultural issues like pressure to fit in and pressure to engage in substance use during socialization. Another area was adjustment in general to post-secondary life, and that adjustment between high school and post-secondary. The issues around financial stress, relationships and interpersonal issues, and importantly, concern for the future. For example, securing a job, to figure out how do they pay back loans and how do they move on with their lives. And then distress and depression were the most prevalent diagnosed mental illnesses, with just over 1/5 of students reporting having received a professional diagnosis of depression at some point in their lifetime. The impact on academics, stress and distress has been repeatedly linked to negative academic outcomes, including reduced challenges with alertness, reduced ability to focus, student attrition, and decreased retention. So very significant impacts. And again, I don't think it's a big surprise to anyone. So the scoping review that Dr. Stewart's team did had 3 main highlights. So in addition to all the other information that they found, and they explored a lot about special subpopulations, and there are several groups that are have increased risk for stress and distress, and they include students belonging to ethnic minorities, international students, military members of the LGBTQ+ community, and Indigenous students. Coping and help seeking. Successful coping, such as reaching out for either informally or formally support, can help to mediate stress and prevent it from developing it into distress. Despite a large proportion of students reporting high levels of stress and distress, it was found that few students report seeking help. Help seeking was particularly low among male students and students belonging to ethnic minorities. Students frequently reported the misuse of alcohol and other substances as a method with dealing with stress and distress. So programs and interventions, one of the challenges is that many post-secondary institutions have implemented programs or interventions to improve the psychological health and resilience of their students, but it was found that few of these programs have been formally evaluated, meaning few could provide evidence for their effectiveness. Individual programs and interventions range from innovative options such as animal therapy, puppy rooms, and mindfulness workshops to more traditional interventions such as cognitive behavioral therapy and skills counseling. There were 11 key themes and needs that were discovered in the literature review. Again, the first one, need to create a mentally healthy campus environment, was the first. There was a lack of cohesion at the pan-Canadian level and no national standard to guide provincial and institutional mental health efforts. With partnerships, they found that there was a need to create partnerships between governments, institutions, student groups, and community mental health agencies. There was a need to have an expanded definition of mental health to include substance use and harm reduction. There was a need to adopt a whole campus strategy to mental health, one that involves everyone. Maintaining student-centeredness in all activities, and having a concentrated and coordinated mental health plan for post-secondary students that covers a broad range of services from prevention to treatment. There was a need for a knowledge exchange and evaluation plan for institutional tools across the country. Anti-stigma and mental health awareness and literacy programs continue to be needed to promote early identification and to improve help seeking. There's an identified need for training for all faculty and staff to support early identification and appropriate referrals. And then finally, ongoing monitoring, quality assurance, assessment, and systematic evaluation activities will be required. And all of this information will be of great assistance as the student standard is being developed. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the other work around youth that the Mental Health Commission is doing. There are great training programs like the Inquiring Mind and Mental Health First Aid with more than 350 people trained across Canada. There's also Headstrong, which is an anti-stigma and mental health promotion initiative that inspires youth ages 12 to 18 to be brave and by teaching them how to reduce stigma and become mental health champions in their school. And also, in just over a month, I'm very excited to share that with Wisdom to Act, we will be hosting the Rainbow Youth Health Forum, a pan-Canadian forum by and for LGBTQ2 Spirit Plus and emerging adults on the creation of safer spaces in healthcare settings. So that's just a very brief overview. For more information, please go to our website and you can get more details on that. Okay, so that's enough of me talking for now. We're going to talk to our panel now, and we're going to take more of a shift to the focus of post-secondary students going into the workforce. So I have a few questions for you, and then we'll look at some of the other questions that are being posed by our participants today. So the first question, I'm going to address this to you, Shifra. So from your perspective and experience, what have been the mental health challenges that you're hearing about or seeing by graduates as they try to secure jobs? What are your thoughts, Shifra?
I mean, there's a variety of different experiences for people depending on their field of study and how they choose to pursue a career right after post-secondary. But I think the most homogenous experience that almost everyone goes through is really trying to engage with the competitive nature of landing a position. And for some people, while it's very straightforward, you know, if you're in a professional program such as engineering or nursing, for example, or social work, things like that, you understand that there's one track for you to gain employment, but oftentimes that setting is quite competitive in its own right. And then on the other hand, you have people who have a bit more of an open path, someone who's studying the arts, for example, and I think what really stresses them out is how to sell themselves while still finding employment that is relevant to their field of study and really kind of excites them to get there at the end of the day. A lot of our data shows that on average it takes about 5 months for a student after graduating post-secondary to find gainful employment that's steady and long-term. And so in that 5-month period, while it doesn't seem very long in the grand scheme of things, it can be quite stressful when you're trying to balance, the cost of living, paying back your loans without any sort of income coming in, and, just also trying to manage the stress of selling yourself and just trying to keep yourself a little bit more balanced than you would have in a post-secondary environment. So I also think that one of the challenges that unfortunately relates to these experiences after graduating is the fact that there's just not a lot of attention historically being paid to the way that we manage stress in post-secondary environments. Obviously that has been changing in the last decade or so, but some of those residual habits have built environments that are difficult to change. And so it'd be really interesting to see what the next 10 years look like as we shift the narrative in this area.
Excellent. Yep. So there's no question that there's lots of challenges that the students are experiencing as they enter the workforce. And thank you for describing those so well, Shifra. Verity, your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Shifra. That was a fabulous kind of overview. I will just share some of my thoughts as both an employer and an administrator in post-secondary. And my lens is health and wellness. It's a lot of what I do. And so Susan talked about the National College Health Assessment results that show, and again, there's going to be no surprise to folks listening on this webinar, that the top 3 factors that our students are saying that are contributing to their inability to achieve their academic goals is stress, anxiety, and sleep. Also, our students reported at some point in the last 12 months that they were feeling overwhelmed with all of the things they had to do, exhausted, and that's not from physical exhaustion, and also very sad. So as an administrator in post-secondary education, as well as a leader of an institution, I'd like to ask the audience and us all to pause and think about those factors in the context of us as individuals, as employees, as supporters of students. And I think that if we all think about how stress, anxiety, and sleep, exhaustion, feelings of being overwhelmed are parts of our daily lives, either as a student and what we're seeing as we support our students, or to be quite honestly as employees, as we navigate, as Shifra said, all of the complexities and the added pressures of when we are expected to perform in the workplace. And so what does this tell us about the health as well as the mental health of our students and our new employees? But that's not all. As a new employee and as a recent graduate, our students are entering new organizations with having to navigate performance expectations, new organizational culture, being assessed, probationary periods, feedback mechanisms, and ways of being given feedback that they perhaps are not used to. Our students and our new graduates and our new employees are experiencing huge degrees of unfamiliarity in terms of structures and process, as well as trying to navigate these complex systems. And I think these are all very challenging things that our recent graduates and our new employees are facing, in addition to what we just talked about that they're telling us as students through the National College Health Assessment. And it's a lot, but then there's more, as Shifra talked about in your comments. Our students, our employees are also dealing with food insecurity, issues with housing, income levels, race, social exclusion, all of those things that we know impact our overall health and well-being. So in summary, I think that when we're looking at preparing our students and our graduates and supporting our new employees, we have to look at this as a very, very important challenge and something that we need to really pay attention to, because there's all kinds of different things that are affecting our student success as well as our new employees. I would suggest that employers have a large role to play, and that we have to look at how we onboard and we support our new employees as they enter our organizations, and how do we use data to track the success of our new employees and their success rates, and how do we assess that experience and ensure that we as employers have done everything we can to ensure that we are aware of and supporting our new employees and our recent graduates in entering the workforce and being able to become their best selves. I think when we look at our workplace, and I was just thinking about this as I was preparing for this webinar, it's kind of an epiphany that I had, and that when we look at our workforce structure, our most seasoned and experienced leaders and managers usually get promoted, and they get promoted because of those skills in terms of their ability to support people in being successful. So inevitably what we have is our new employees and our recent graduates not being supported by our most seasoned leaders and managers as they enter the workforce. And I don't think that that is unusual for post-secondary institutions. I think it's common for most organizations. So when the folks that need us most perhaps don't have our most experienced and seasoned managers and leadership supporting them. So when you look at that as a factor in terms of supporting recent graduate and student success and new employee success, I have to ask about and challenge ourselves of how do we support our students and new employees through mentoring, sponsorship, and coaching programs that are formal in terms of supporting our employees' success. And I don't think we have enough of that. I don't think we formally are approaching that with the intention that we should. And certainly going through the preparation for this webinar has really made me think as a leader, what can we do better in terms of looking at that onboarding and training process to support our graduates who are dealing with these huge complexities as they come from post-secondary education to the workforce.
Great. Thanks, Verity. It's a daunting challenge when I hear you describe all that, and I'm feeling that the students are entering the workforce pretty exhausted in some cases, and the challenges, of course, are just beginning at that point. So, the great kind of summary of that. So that's terrific. Whoops, I went the wrong way here. That kind of brings us to, so what exactly, like you've started to touch on what we can do to prepare the students in the workplace to promote the mental health of the students for tomorrow's workforce, but can you give us some really specific examples or programs or whatever that you think might be helpful? And I'll ask Verity first, and then Shifra, I want you to comment on that as well.
Thank you, Susan. There's traditional forms of support that most post-secondary institutions provide students, and those supports are usually embedded in faculties through deans of student success or student affairs. Those positions are there to specifically guide students through their academic journey and navigate questions about future career, and sometimes the career is not just about the workforce, but it's about the next academic step in their career. So We have structures in place in post-secondary to look at career counseling as well at a central level in terms of units, like I supervise in student health and wellness, and we also have embedded models that are very successful. We have centralized career services that look at preparing students through workshops, programming, resume writing, peer support, professional advisors. They're giving students tangible advice, guidance, and specific knowledge and building that skill set to prepare them to be competitive. On a more formal level, in terms of embedded experiential learning and practices that are aligned with high retention in terms of persistence of students, we have high-impact practices, including co-op programs, including service learning, internships. You think about what a student will learn when they go and study abroad and how much their own personal confidence and competence is built through visiting another country and navigating those systems all on their own and being really successful at it. Those are very concrete, evidence-based, evidence-informed practices that universities use to really prepare students for the next step in their professional careers. Life after university is sometimes really scary. As a co-op student graduate in my undergraduate degree, I was very fortunate. I had 5 work terms. I experienced 4 different workplaces before I left the university. I did not have any of the stress or anxiety of I've never been in a professional workplace before. So it was really just allowed me to focus in on what I was there to do, which was to do a great job for my employer. And the second thing what I think universities and post-secondary institutions really need to also do is to empower students, and this is my health and wellness lens, to really look after their own health. So when I often speak to students in orientation, it's my favorite time of year, and we talk to students, and I ask students, what are the 3 things that you can do, that you have to do to make sure that you can actually fulfill your academic goals and live the best life you can while you're here at university? Most students will be able to come up with sleep, diet, and exercise. They absolutely will. But answering that question is very, very different than executing it as an individual and ensuring that you are actually taking care of yourself and understand the power that you have in terms of making sure that you are best positioned to meet your goals. And so, and I don't think that employees are in any different situation, and so the continuity of challenges that our students face while in university and our new employees face in the workforce. And there's all kinds of people in this webinar that will be saying, I'm not new to the workforce, but I still struggle with these things. It's really, really important to build capacity in that term that we're all very comfortable with and used to hearing as resilience. I have one of my favorite authors, he wrote a book called Resilience, and who's a Navy SEAL. His name is Eric Greitens. And he positions resilience as the virtue of being able to work through hardship and become bigger and better as a result of it. And I so like the positioning of that because it comes from a strengths-based approach. And so when you think about students who are crossing this graduation stage and they're finishing, they're getting their degree, and the focus is on actually crossing the stage in that celebration. But the real achievement and the real magic and the real capacity and confidence building has come from the experience of getting the degree. And so the author of Resilience also talks and attaches the term achievement with happiness. And he suggests that achievement builds happiness and contributes to happiness. And if we think about, for example, I've ran several marathons, and you focus on, just like crossing the graduation stage, we focus on getting the degree. I focus on getting my medal as I cross the marathon finish line. But really, the sense of achievement comes from, and the satisfaction comes from, in the case of running marathons, the 18 weeks that you run in the snow, the rain at 5 a.m., and you do things that no one else can do but you can do. And so our kind of confidence comes from, I did that. So if something comes your way, say, I've done that. I've got a university degree. I got this. I can handle this assignment for my new employer. This is nothing. And so, all kinds of different authors and very well-known authors say the same thing. Sheryl Sandberg in Lean In talks about this uncomfortable feeling that we get in our stomachs, and when new students are approaching something that they are uncomfortable with, they feel stress, they feel anxiety. Sheryl Sandberg suggests that it's that uncomfortable feeling, and at that very moment when you should lean in and you should tackle it and act. And the achievement that comes from doing that builds you for your next challenge. And it's something that I think as employers that is hiring new students and graduates, we have to acknowledge that although these students have done amazing things and gotten these degrees and done some amazing work to get there, I don't know if they are intentionally, if they are aware of what kind of hard work they have already done and what they have accomplished to get there. And so when we look at onboarding new employees, going through probationary periods with new employees, how can we create environments, and this, Susan, gets to the workplace standards, how can we create environments that it is safe for our employees to fail, and to actually celebrate failure in a way that it is looked about as learning and working through hardship and getting bigger and better as employees and individuals. And so I'm really looking forward to the discussion on the workplace standards as well as the student standards, because I think it is so important to be able to create environments where students have worked through this throughout their degree experience and their experience in academic and at the academy, but those challenges and those experiences will continue in the workforce. And so how do we build the confidence and the competence for our students and our new employees to be able to learn from those experiences and look at them as being positive. And it's part of the experience versus I failed. And I think that's a huge degree in terms of the responsibility sits on the employer.
Yeah, and that's an excellent response. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of stress is it healthy stress, and at what point in the mental health continuum does it become unhealthy stress and debilitating? So is it energizing or debilitating, and what can students learn from their accomplishments in post-secondary that can be applied to the actual working world? So excellent information. Shifra, I want to get your take on this. What do you think needs to be done to prepare the students in the workplace to promote the mental health of students today for tomorrow's workforce?
I mean, I think Verity touched on a lot of important aspects around the people that are there to support students in a post-secondary environment. And just while she was talking, I took down a few. Maybe if I sort of phrase my response from someone who has experienced very polarizing times as a post-secondary student. So I did a professional degree in nursing, and now I'm just finishing up my arts degree in sociology. And so I think if across the decade that I've spent in a classroom, one thing that really escapes me, and I'm really surprised that I haven't seen so far, is the integration of all of these skills, the primary intervention, sort of teaching people to be set up for success rather than just intervening during a crisis time. A lot of these aspects are not integrated into our actual education. And I understand that, with some fields of study, there's so much to learn, and you have to fit it into 4 years. And sometimes I'm incredibly surprised at how students get it done. In that time frame, we're taking 5 classes a semester, having labs and tutorials for each of those classes. It's incredibly overwhelming. I mean, that word has been used a ton, but I think, you know, when you talk about mental health and sort of setting yourself up for success should never be an ancillary piece of education. It really needs to be embedded throughout whatever we're learning in the classroom. And there's not just, you know, an argument for your personalized well-being, but also how to set you up for success as an employee entering the workforce, being a future leader. You know, soft skills such as communication and boundaries, knowing how to, you know, make smart goals. Like, there's usually maybe an hour of that type of education embedded throughout an entire program at times. Yeah. I'm starting to see across campuses people talk about consent, for example. Like, that is a word that is very much often conflated with sexual violence and sexual violence prevention. But I think it goes further than that, and I think that people need to talk about it past the first week of orientation. Because to me, consent doesn't just mean, you know, physical consent and boundaries, but it's also about knowing your limitations, learning how to speak up for yourself and say, actually, I can't take on this thing right now. Or you're in a group project and saying, you know, I'm setting up boundaries for myself and my expectations, and making sure that you're not being taken advantage of, or you're realizing how to balance all of the responsibilities that are brought to you. So I think, you know, aspects of that type of soft skill really needs to be the norm rather than a program that you know, you can engage in if you have the time. A lot of students don't. They're working part-time. They're doing extracurriculars. And they need to be supported. There needs to be a space carved out in the classroom or during their education, you know, that makes it sort of mandatory to address how these skills are going to set you up for success, and maybe even personalized in the context of their field of study. One of the things that I found incredibly beneficial, although it's happened very rarely, is when professors have said, for class credit, I'd like you to attend a workshop on wellness, or I'd like you to attend a workshop on like with career services. And they make it part of the curriculum and part of a graded engagement, which I think is nice because it encourages students to go. It doesn't ask them to take additional time out of their incredibly busy schedule. And it really shows that, you know, your educators are just as invested in this type of material and making sure that you have access to it as you would be. And so I think hopefully we see a little bit more of that. I think the next step, you know, we've talked a lot about reducing stigma, and unfortunately, but at the same time very fortunate, the students are coming forward and they're wanting to access supports, and more they're wanting to access supports early on. But we need to be able to meet that capacity in some way, shape, or form. And I think the next step is just to, rather than address that concern when a student requests it, which is usually not until they're maybe in a place that's not the most positive, to just sort of make it normative, have that question, that conversation in a classroom, normalize it amongst people who have maybe never thought of reaching out for help or are now resourced with the information on campus, rather than people who are just maybe never going to be exposed to it. I think it's a really great place to integrate that kind of learning, and I'm hoping to see that more moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I mean, I hear you saying a lot about the integration of skills, of soft skills, having safe places, and faculty and staff being really, you know, involved in this as well. I was speaking with a college yesterday, and their new sexual violence policy is actually being taught by the faculty to their students as they come in the classroom. So we're seeing some great progress there as well, and some very creative ways of being involved and supporting the students. Okay, that's great. Okay. So the last question, and then we're going to take some questions from our audience, our registrants today. And we've been touching on this a lot throughout the conversation today, but is about how the workplace standard and the student standard can complement each other to improve the mental health of tomorrow's workforce. And Verity, you were alluding to this earlier, and I'm just wondering if you want to expand a little bit more on that.
Of course. We at Dalhousie, Susan, in your introductory comments, you talked about the workplace standards, and you also highlighted some campus-wide initiatives that are so important. And most of those initiatives take a socio-ecological lens on what it's going to take. Schiffer talked about that we need to shift a lot of different things, that it's a part of our culture, part of our environment, as well as providing individual support to students. But what are we doing to support our community, and what do we need to change about our systems and our policies to ensure that they are more student-centered or more employee-centered? And so at Dalhousie, we use the workplace standards. And I love, and Susan, you talked about having the implementation guide. It is amazing for the workplace standards. As an administrator, what the workplace standards as well as the standards for students, what it will do is it allow our institution, and I will be very honest with everyone, we were embarking on our own Healthy Campus strategy development. Of course, Susan, you talked about all kinds of work happening already in all these institutions. We have had some fabulous work being done, but it's not under a strategic lens. And so we have actually, with the announcement of the student standards being developed, what we've done is we've halted the development of our Healthy Campus strategy because we wanted to make sure that we have the alignment of the workplace standards as well as the student standards, because what that allows us to do as an institution is to develop tools to evaluate our current position based on the information that we will collect on how we're doing against the standards, and allow us to make decisions, as Shefra talked about, that strategically are aligned with where our students need the support most and where our staff need the support most. There are all types of needs and demands that institutions and organizations are having to manage, and so there are limited funds. And so how can we make sure that the things that we do are evidence-informed, that have been proven to be successful? Loved the programs that the Mental Health Commission offers, the Inquiring Minds program, the Mental Health First Aid. Those are all programs that are evidence-informed. We know that if we do them, that they're going to be effective. Versus us creating our own systems or our own standards. And so what it also allows us to do is hopefully compare ourselves on how we're doing with other like institutions and similar environments to see if there's something that we really, really need to work on in addition to any gaps relative to the standards. And so we are really, really excited at Dalhousie University to be able to have these two sets, these two frameworks, to be able to inform our Healthy Campus strategic work. And so just very excited about it.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I know when I first started on this project myself, that was one of my first questions. How can we be promoting and protecting student mental health if we aren't addressing that of faculty and staff? So it's just wonderful to hear what you and many other post-secondary organizations are doing in order to set the stage. And we really set the stage of expectations for students as well. They know what they need then in order to enter the workplace, and they have different expectations of the workplace as a result of that. And they're the game changers of the future, so it's good to hear. Shifra, do you have any closing comments on that particular question that you wanted to share?
I mean, just really quickly, the question says, how could the standards complement each other? And in my opinion, I think the word should be, like, how should the standards complement each other? And maybe I have a bit more of a personal attachment to making sure that the workplace standards, really helps other people. As a nurse, I often see healthcare, the industry in general. There's a lot of things that can be improved, and how are we, I guess the question just boils down to, how are we taking care of the people that are supposed to be taking care of everybody else? Yeah. So it's not enough to just put out a student standard and talk about, a variety of options that you can implement without the people behind those projects, people leading those initiatives, being in a good place by themselves. And I think it's also just really important to sort of note how both standards, eventually with the development and the publication of the student standard, but the workplace standard especially, allows for a flexible interpretation rather than an evaluation, because we don't want people feeling like they're failing when they're trying to do something really well. You have very different kinds of institutions across the country with very different capacities and very different mandates, but the beautiful part about the standard is that you can interpret how to best serve each requirement in that standard. So whether that means if you liaise with a community partner or you're able to sort of set up resources on campus, depending on how your internal resources are allocated, as long as there's some effort. I think the effort and the intention also goes a long way when it comes to just the implementation of these standards and sort of even evaluating yourself. If your heart is in the right place and your culture, your institutional culture really believes in what you're doing, I think that goes a lot farther than simply just having programs or initiatives in place. So.
Yeah, and you're embarking, Shifra, on the Broken Hearts program soon, aren't you? Did you want to just chat briefly about that?
Yes. So I'm actually on CASA's Alumni Council, but I can definitely speak to it a little bit. I think if you all want some more information, please definitely contact the chair or the executive director at the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. But essentially, the program is piggybacking off of Bell Let's Talk Day, and it's Bell Let's Talk. It's about starting a conversation. It's a little bit more informal about how you can have a conversation about mental health and approach expanding the dialogue. But the Student Let's Act campaign is sort of partnering with Bell Let's Talk to talk about how you translate that dialogue into the next step. So essentially we have a federal initiative with the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations that focuses on specifically changing the definition of disability to include mental health and to really get rid of the incredibly restrictive standards around accommodations for disability, because as of right now, if you're trying to engage in some sort of support, especially academically, you have to have sort of a long-term diagnosis, which really it really impacts students quite harshly, especially if you have mental illness in an episodic nature or something that's not as intense as an 18-month period, but has significantly impacted your academics. I mean, 18 months is 3 semesters, and a lot can go wrong in that, if you are just waiting to seek help for that time. And then the other half of the Broken Heart campaign allows each institution that participates to either focus on a provincial aspect of their mental health campaigns, something that's near and dear to them in a provincial context, or focus their advocacy towards their administration at their institution. So, students have done a lot of amazing grassroots things across the country, whether it be implementing peer-to-peer programming, advocating for funding, things like that. And so they just, they'll be able to choose which area they want to prioritize, either provincial or institutional, to go with that. And hopefully, with timelines such as, budgets provincially being released and also the federal budget, if there is any sort of financial implication in those apps, they're taken into consideration. But it's really exciting to have a unified voice across the country understanding how important this is and how to move forward.
Excellent. Well, good luck with your progress with that. Okay, well, I'm just looking at a few questions that are coming in that I just want to try to address in the short 5 minutes we have left. So the first question that I got was, to what extent are students being engaged in the process of identifying and addressing gaps in mental health and wellness service delivery? I'm going to speak just first from the standard perspective, and then I'll throw it over to you, Shifra. So as far as the actual development of the student standard in looking at this, we'll be engaging students through the technical committee that we talked about earlier with the CSA group. We'll be holding national consultations, and we're going to be making available consultation packages that will ask those specific questions, and we'll be using an online form. And these are just to name a few things. But from your perspective, Shifra, what would you see would be important in us being able to engage the gaps in mental health and wellness service delivery? What would you suggest?
I mean, just speaking very broadly, I think there is no better time than now. And obviously, we would have hoped that maybe as a society we would have figured some of this stuff out years prior, but there is a real appetite right for students to engage, which I think is very exciting because they're realizing that this is something that they do want to prioritize whatever spare time they have, and sort of just improve the environment for everybody. And I think that's exciting. But at the same time, I also think that students, while they're engaging with the technical committee and there's a ton of diverse representation out there, there really is sort of an onus on institutions to be paying attention to this process and checking in with these consultations, not only to maybe even participate themselves and add a perspective that a student might not have, but also to just be present and hear what students are saying about their experiences on campus. So there's a variety of consultation methods happening across the country, like you said, online, forums, in-person engagement, discussions with the technical committee. And I think that institutions should really sort of do their best to participate in that, because students are, at the end of the day, there for a primary objective, which is their post-secondary education, not to be the beacon or the champion of this project, right? That's asking a lot for students to take on, and some of them are doing it, and I'm incredibly thankful for those people because I know how much of a sacrifice it is to sort of add that on to your education. But at this point moving forward, I think it should really be focused on a collaborative process and just really working with each other and making sure, people show up to listen and have open hearts and open minds to see how to best move forward.
I think that's a great start for us for sure. Another question came in. Okay. How can we encourage students to build resilience and manage anxiety, mental health challenges that are exacerbated when students are searching for jobs? So maybe Verity, if you might want to address that one.
I think that Shifra has already kind of covered it in her comments about it has to be about what we do as an institution embedded in the way we work and the way we support our students in the classroom as part of our everyday culture. To ask a student who has very limited time, who may be working a part-time job, trying to put food on the table, trying to pay their tuition as well as doing an amazing job in their academics, to commit to an extensive program or a workshop, it may be just asking too much. I can talk from our experience at Dalhousie that in order for a student to persist through a program, even when it is directly related to supporting them in an area of need that has been clearly identified, it takes exorbitant amounts of resources and support for that student to be able to persist through that program because of the competing demands in their time. So I really agree with what Shifra has said earlier, that it has to be about who we are and what we do in the classroom as part of credit rather than being something extra. So that encouragement has to be in the classroom and part of what we do versus something extra that the students are asked to do.
Right. Excellent. Wow, okay. That's great. Okay, I'm going to ask one last question that is a little bit less about going into the workplace from post-secondary, but one that's close to the heart of so many moms and dads that might be listening in, as well as being involved in post-secondary adventures. And it's, what kind of suggestions do you have for parents sending their child away to university for the first time? And this is one that tugs at my heartstrings as well. So I'll just open it up to either one of you.
I will just add very quickly that as a parent of a 15-year-old, very looking forward to my daughter going to post-secondary education and having wonderful conversations with parents. My advice to parents would be to ensure that to have full confidence in their student, to be able to handle what's coming at them, to prepare your student for the fact that post-secondary education is going to challenge your student, and it's okay. And it's okay to learn from mistakes, and it's okay to go through all of these wonderful experiences that they're going to go through, and to know that there are some amazing supports at the institution for that student to reach out to, and to allow your student to explore and find what support works best for them.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So I think we've had a great webinar. There are so many questions we were unable to get to today, but we will be considering them as we move through the development of the standards. So it's a project, I think, that's really creating a lot of interest by the numbers that we've had involved today, and so I encourage all our participants to get involved. You'll hear more about this. There'll be more information pushed out, but look on our website and email us at studentstandards@mentalhealthcommission.ca. Verity and Shifra, thank you so much for your contributions, your insight, your wisdom, your experiences today, and I wish everyone a wonderful day today, and please let us know how we did, and we'll be sending an email satisfaction survey shortly, and we hope that you can fill that out. So everyone have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.